The Heads Up podcast is brought to you by USA Wrestling, the National Coaches Council, the National Coaches Education Program, and the Greg Strobel Leadership Academy. Let's get to the show.
Well, good afternoon. Mike Haggerty alongside again with Mike Clayton, and for another edition of our Heads Up podcast. I'm very excited to bring along a special guest who I've had the privilege of knowing for quite some time, as he grew up in the state of Missouri and was a former wrestler, went on to do great things in the state and high school, and then bounced around a little bit, ended up at the University of Missouri, completed his career, and then went on to do some fantastic things in comedy, and still out there shaking the bushes. And that of course is Greg Warren. Greg, so good to have you with us, buddy.
Hey guys. Yeah, great to be here. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So Greg, give us, let's sort of build this in reverse, maybe.
Okay.
Where you're at today. What's kind of going on in your world? You're back in St. Louis, as I understand.
Yeah. I live in St. Louis. And I travel, I don't know, probably about 200 days out of the year, doing shows and stuff like that. And, yeah, it's probably the luckiest life anybody could have. It's as far as career goes, it's a pretty awesome way to make a living. So, yeah, I'm finishing up. I'm going to shoot a new special in October, and I'm pretty excited about it. So it needs a little bit of work. I don't know. It's probably reminiscent of some wrestling things. In wrestling, you always have like that. Whether it's the state championship or the NCAAs, you always have that date off in the future that you're shooting for. And with comedy, I guess it's the same thing. For me, it's, it'll take about 3 or 4 years to build the right hour for a special. So I've been working on this, really kind of started during the pandemic, and yeah, I'm getting close. So pretty excited about that.
Can you give us? I'm sorry. Greg, you already jump on something. My coach education side goes a little crazy when folks say good stuff. So you were talking about how many years it went in to make that hour.
Yeah.
Sounds like delayed gratification. Sounds like patience. A lot of things. What is it for you?
Yeah. I mean, I remember my college coach, Wes Roper, talking a lot about delaying gratification. And, I guess that's certainly not my instinct. And in some ways, comedy is a mix of both, because, if a guy writes a movie or a guy acts in a movie, they're not going to see the results for that for a long time. They don't really get to enjoy a lot of the joy from that for a long time. But comedy, you're lucky, because, I can work on something today, and tonight I can go run it on stage and get immediate feedback, like immediate gratification, hopefully, in some way. So there is a little of both, but as far as, putting together something that you want to put out and be proud of, I think that takes a few years. This time, I think it'll be about 3 years. And the last couple specials have been, more along the lines of 4.
Wow.
But yeah, I think, I draw a lot of parallels. I have a lot of time to think. And when I write, a lot of times when I write, it's just like sitting down and journaling for a few pages as one exercise that I do. And, I've learned that there's going to be these great moments in comedy and show business. And, I've got to do some TV stuff. It'll be pretty awesome when we shoot that special. You get to play to some huge crowds sometimes. But you also have to sort of find the small amounts of fun, the mild fun, I guess is what I call it. And I think there's some of that in wrestling too, because, it's pretty cool when you, win a tournament or, go to the NCAA tournament and do well. But, day in, day out in wrestling, you have to find this sort of small fun, which is, hey, I'm going to see if I can improve on this technique, or if I can get a takedown off of this guy. And it's not that fun. That's the problem. You try to, I think early on in my comedy career, I did a couple of things on TV, and I was like, okay, that was the greatest day of my life. That was the most fun I've ever had. I just need to do that every day. I just need to see if I can match that level of, excitement and fun every day. It's impossible. You can't do it. You can't do it in wrestling either. So I think with comedy and wrestling, for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to just see if I can figure out this joke. If I can just figure out, I do an exercise sometimes. I'll put like a topic at the top of every page in a notebook, and I'll run through the topics and be like, okay, how can I make this 3% funnier, or 2% more relatable, or 1% more interesting? If you think about how can I make this a joke that will kill on the Tonight Show or will be the closer on my next special, it'll just fall apart. Which I think in wrestling, and I'm you guys have stayed with the sport. I haven't been a big part of it other than as a comedian in a long time, but I remember that sort of having I don't know, when I was in high school, I used to go up to this, the junior college. It was right by my house. It was called Merrimack Junior College. And man, I was there all the time in the spring and the summer. And I think it was between like my sophomore and junior year. I was going up there, all the time. And the coach there, Coach Ron Maricatani, he showed me this tilt. It was just a cheap tilt type thing. And I was just like screwing around with it, and it was, they weren't organized practices. It was just, you'd sort of, hey, you want to go a little bit, or you want to, and I was like, I'll never use this. So you screw around with it. And then I remember during the high school year, I was pretty good, and there wasn't a ton of guys in the room that were really, really tough. So I'd be, all right, I'm bored. Let me see if I can screw around with this move. Well, I can't get it 90% of the time. Then you get it 50% of the time. And then you're beating up some guy in a match. And you're like, I'll just try this tilt in a match. And then, next thing I know, like that's the move that I used in the state. I still remember this state semifinal match in high school. I don't think I had the mental, I don't think I had probably the right mental attitude. I mean, in some ways, I guess it did, but I didn't have the confidence, and I was a little bit OCD back then. And the coach would be like, "Well, you going to take this guy?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I can take him." In the back of my head, I was like, "No chance. No. This guy, I don't think I'm going to beat him." And I remember I get out there, it's like, I'm just going to have fun, and I cheap tilt. It was back when there was like a 1 count for back points. So I cheap tilted this guy like 20 times. And that was a big turning point in my career. But I think that element of a small amount of fun is key in a lot of things.
When I was coaching at Army, the Simpsons and a couple other guys on the team, because I know you did West Point for a year, right?
1 year. Yeah. I was what they call a quitter in the Army.
Oh, yeah. I think people who quit at the academies show a lot of courage, because if going in there now that it's not for you, then it's really important that you go find what is you. And
yeah,
I mean, cool you did that.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know how much courage it was, I mean, I did go, so I sort of made a deal, probably more with my dad than anybody, that I was going to stay through plebe year. And I stayed the entire plebe year. And I still remember we were marching back from some meeting. I think we had a meeting at the big hall there, Eisenhower Hall. And they were talking to us about what we were going to do in the summer. It was like 1 day left. You're going home. And, or in a couple of days, it was over. And plebe year back then was brutal, and I made it through. And they were like, okay, you're going to go to this camp, and you guys are going to be, you're going to drive tanks, and you're going to learn all about this stuff when you get home. And when you get back to your barracks, we're going to lay out all your equipment. And, we're going to have an inspection to make sure you have all your equipment. And I remember thinking, I don't have half of that equipment. I lost it. And they're going to yell at me about that. And I thought that I wasn't going to get yelled at anymore after the first year. I thought that and so I remember marching back being like, I'm leaving, man. I can't want to do this. I was sort of playing those games with myself all year long, where I didn't know if I was going to stay or not, but yeah.
Yeah. It's not definitely not a forever. So anyway, the Simpsons and a couple other guys, they'd start cutting weight, and then they just kind of, they get, maybe some sweats on, and they just start breakdancing in a corner, and they kind of like go through, and then, oh, that was a good move. Like you said, like you're still cutting weight, but you did it in a way that made it kind of fun and a little bit. So
I think it's a little bit of fun, small amounts of joy, because you can't match. There's going to be these giant, huge events in your career, hopefully. And then when you're wrestling, absolutely, you're going to have these monumental days, but you can't match those. They're not going to be there. You're not going to have that level of the satisfaction every day. So I think it's like small amounts of fun. I try to do that when I'm writing.
Greg, can you give us a little bit of insight about your entry into comedy? From general observations, that's not something that a lot of folks in the wrestling community probably understand, or how that actually happened for you. I mean, I know that you started early in college, but can you give us a little more depth, a little more insight on your entry into comedy?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't linear. I started and stopped multiple times. So unfortunately, I'm probably going to give you a little bit of a long answer. But,
that's okay. We've got plenty of time, brother.
Yeah. When I was in college at Mizzou, there was a comedy club there called Deja Vu, and it was owned by this guy, Freddie DeMarco. And Fred's, I still have a really good relationship with him, and he was kind of like a mentor to me. And Craig Martin, who was the captain of the team, was a bartender, at the bar. And I was like, I didn't have an outlet back then, so I was kind of obnoxious, and like I would just I was loud, and I was always, I don't think I didn't screw around in practice, but before and after practice I certainly did. And when we'd have parties, Martin owned a trailer back then. He lived in a trailer, and we'd have parties at this trailer, and I would get up and do some version of stand-up comedy. I don't think anybody could call it that. It's basically just being loud and obnoxious and trying to make people laugh. And Craig, entered me in some contest at Deja Vu. They had like an amateur contest. And I still remember, I think it was like my first year at Mizzou, which is, I had went to West Point and then I went to Mizzou. So that West Point year counted as a redshirt year. And then, I won the contest. And I remember at Friday practice, it was in preseason type stuff, but, Roper was pretty, we grinded. He was pretty tough. And Wes, like on Friday practice one day, I didn't even know he knew I was going to do this thing. And, we're thinking we have like a 2-hour grinder, and about an hour in, he goes, "All right, guys, that's it. Everybody go home, get showered up. Let's go down and watch Warren," So, so the whole team was there, and, I won it, but, it was, comedy contests are kind of stupid. It's not always an indicator of who's the funniest, but I thought I was pretty funny. And I probably did it a handful of times during college. I mean, I was a Division I college wrestler at the time, and I was, that takes up, you guys know, it takes up all your energy. And so every now and then I do it, but it wasn't what I was serious about, and wasn't what I was focused on. And, I when I got out of college, let's see, I graduated as really in 90, but I had an extra year of eligibility. And I stayed to an extra year because I wanted to, I missed being an All-American by one match my junior year. And I wanted a shot at being an All-American. So I came back, and I was in grad school classes, but I regret now I didn't give it 100%. I was screwing off, and I didn't take it seriously. So after the NCAA's my senior year, I kind of just dropped out of school, that grad school stuff, and was like, all right, I'm going to go be a comedian. And right around the time, I had sort of one of my first serious girlfriends, and she had broken up with me right around that time, right before nationals, I think, man. And it was, it was just earth shattering to me. I look back, and it's, a little silly, but yeah, I was just lost. And I moved to Chicago. My friend, one of my best friends, was in art school there, and I kind of stayed in, like in this little alcove in his place. And immediately I was just lost. I was like, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And I was like, I don't know what it was, but I regret it in a lot of ways. In some ways I don't, but after like 2 weeks, I was like, I can't do this. I have to have structure in my life. I'm used to so much. I'm used to that thing that we were talking about of like this overarching purpose of, I got the Nationals in 10 months. I got, the duel against Oklahoma in a month. And I also was used to, you got practice every day, you got all this stuff. And it was the first time I was without that. And I was lost. And I don't know. I just sort of freaked out a little bit. And I also was kind of like, I was upset about the girl. And I was like, I went to a couple of comedy shows in Chicago and met some guys that were, at the time I thought older, which now they're much younger. But I was like, I don't really know if I like these guys' lives. They were single, and which I am, but they were, and it just felt to me like they didn't live a full life. And I was like, I need to go have a family and get a job. And I chickened out, I kind of did. And I went back to St. Louis, and I got a job with Procter and Gamble, and selling Pringles and Duncan Hines and Crisco. And I moved down to Houston, and I had a sales territory down there, and I did well. I started like most wrestlers. If you just sort of work hard and do what you're supposed to, I learned, and I did well, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. It wasn't wrestling, and it didn't feel like an overarching purpose. And I started doing comedy again down there, off and on, a couple times. I had like a run where I'd do it, and then I'd have a bad show, and I'd be like, what am I doing? This is not the life that I want to live. I have this job, and I'm advancing and getting promoted. So I was in Houston doing it off and on for about 5 years. And then I was in Cincinnati, which is the headquarters of Procter & Gamble, doing it. I had a bigger job up there. And I was doing it off and on there, but for the last 3 years, more on than off. And those last couple of years, I was working, and then I was doing stand-up most nights. Cincinnati's kind of centrally located, so I was like the house MC at a club in Dayton 1 week a month, a club in Cincinnati 1 week a month, and a club in Columbus 1 week a month. And the Columbus one, the guy was pretty cool. He's still a really good friend of mine, but he was an ex-wrestler, and he was like he gave me a lot of leeway. I was like, dude, I can't work. Back then the week was like Tuesday through Sunday, and I was like, I got this job now. They moved me into the office. Back when I had a sales territory up there, I could just kind of be wherever I wanted to be. But I was like, they moved me in an office. I can't be up here during the week. He's like, he goes, you're a wrestler. He goes, just come Friday through Sunday. I'll find somebody to fill in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, this guy, Dave Stroop, man, he's a really good friend of mine still. But yeah, and I started getting a little better at it. I mean, comedy is not one of those things where you're going to have instant success. Most people. And to do it right, to get good at it, there's really no shortcuts. There are shortcuts to sort of having commercial success or getting famous, especially now with the internet. You could be like this really big thing on YouTube, but you don't really know this sort of blocking and tackling of being a stand-up comedian. And I really like doing stand-up comedy. So those last couple of years, I started to get better, and I was trying to figure out a way to do both things. I was trying to figure like, well, hey, they can just transfer me to New York or LA, where there's all kinds of opportunity for comedy, and I can do comedy at night, in a bigger arena, and work during the day. And they were working on doing that for me because, they liked me, and I eventually, like, it just wasn't happening that quickly. And I was like, I sort of have to take the leap. And I quit, I quit the job, and I had saved a little bit of money. I basically lived out of my car that first year. I was on the road like 51 out of 52 weeks, just traveling around the country doing stand-up. And then I got a couple of breaks. I got invited to do the Montreal Comedy Festival, which is sort of it's a place to sort of break out a little bit. And some people saw me there, and I got a TV credit, and I got an agent, and a manager, and and then it was a lot of up and down. I've had some pretty cool stuff since then, but it's not a linear path. For some people do get that like giant break, and they are off to the races, and they're rich and famous from that time. It hasn't been that way with me. But I think it's been a really rich career. I've gotten to do some pretty cool stuff.
Greg, you weave in a lot of real life situations for you. You talk about your wrestling. You talk about your time in the military. You talk about your parents, right?
Yeah.
You talk a lot about things that are really what appear to be pretty important to you, and then you make light of it. Can you give us all a little bit of insight about how you construct that, and how you can take those elements of life and shed that humor and make it relevant to your comedy act?
Yeah, I can try. So I think I figured out early that let's say you're just going to do some joke about I don't know, vacuum cleaners, or maybe more something that's that everybody's talking about right now. Let's say it's about the Kardashians or whatever. And I think I figured out, and I did try to write a lot of those jokes. I think, as a sharpening the saw type exercise, I still write some of those jokes. But I sort of figured out, hey, if there's 100 comedians and they're all going to write a joke about this topic that everybody knows in and out, I don't think my joke is going to be the top 10. I don't think it's going to be the crispest. I don't know if that's a word either. Crispiest, I believe. I don't think it's going to be the best joke. So I started thinking, and Fred gave me some advice on this, and I watched some other comics that I liked, and I started, I'm going to try to talk about stuff that most people aren't talking about. And the best way to do that is something that's personal. So, I started talking about, there's not a lot of guys that are talking about wrestling, or the joke that probably broke things open for me was did a bit about playing the clarinet in the band in high school and wrestling on the team. And, it took forever to sort of figure out how to make that funny. It's weird because the stuff that's the closest to you is sometimes the stuff that's the hardest to write about, but you got to keep chipping away at it. I've told some younger comics, you sit down and you're like, okay, I've got these, 6 or 7 topics. I'm going to write about wrestling, and I'm going to write about Starbucks, and I'm going to write about, insurance or whatever. And, you're like, man, the wrestling jokes aren't coming that quick. They're just not. I should probably concentrate on this other stuff. That's actually not right. Stick with the wrestling thing, because once you crack it, it will be good forever. It'll be your best joke. And interestingly enough, this special that I'm going to record in October is a lot of it is about my experience at Procter & Gamble. And man, it took what now? I don't know, 20 years to really figure out how to crack it. Like I've that's been in the notebook. I've sat down at one time or another for 20 years being like, what's funny about Pringles? What's funny about Jif? What's funny about Duncan Hines? And it wasn't like I couldn't write a joke or two about it, but nothing really opened up. And then I sort of started talking about peanut butter a lot on stage, and I was kind of kidding around. I sort of found that I was like 60% serious and 40% kidding, but I was basically talking about, like how proud I was of Jif, and, like how great of a brand it was, and how I'm still passionate about it. And people started laughing, and I kind of went off to the races on that. And I've done the same with like Duncan Hines and Pringles and stuff, but it's mostly about peanut butter, which incidentally enough, like I wrote this whole thing about peanut butter, and production company's interested in it, and I got a guy that's going to direct it that has some he's got some notoriety, so I'm pretty excited. And then 3 weeks ago, Jif basically that they find salmonella in some Jif. If you go to the grocery store right now, there's no Jif on the shelf. So there's no Jif. It doesn't exist because like 14 people got sick from salmonella and they traced it back to Jif. So there's a product recall of every one of their products. So I'm like, oh no, now I'm going to have to, are these jokes still going to work? And just like probably, it sounds a little too convenient, but just like wrestling, if you're dealt a little bit of a challenge, embrace it and build on it. So like, I was like, okay, I'm just going to talk about and stick with the thing. Like, basically like say, hey, salmonella, first of all, it's 14 people. That's not a lot. And I want to apologize. I didn't do it. It was a long time ago, but I feel partially responsible. I wish I could have gone back there. I wish when I was working at Jif, I would have said, hey guys, if you're thinking about coming up with like a raw chicken flavored peanut butter, don't do it. Like it's not worth it. There could be trouble. And, I just want to point out like, Peter Pan had a similar issue in 2006. Skippy has not had a salmonella problem, but just this year there were small particles of steel in their peanut butter. So we've all dealt with it. And you're saying, well, what about the organic peanut butter? They don't have any problems like that. We're like, well, that's because they've only sold like 50 jars of that stuff. Okay, like nobody wants it. That's not a fair comparison. So I was like, okay, let's just see if we can, and so far it's worked. I was like, and now I actually have extra material about it. But when that first happened, I was like, oh no, I've based this whole thing. Like if I take out the peanut butter part of this hour, it doesn't exist. So, I was literally like, wow, I was like mad at Jif, but
Greg, what is it about you in particular, or any comic that can sit here and talk about a subject that is so mundane, just so out there, peanut butter, and all of a sudden it becomes funny? The average person, 99.9% of the people, can't talk about peanut butter, and it's a funny issue. You bring up peanut butter here, and just the way that you framed it, and it's something funny.
Well, thanks.
How does that play? How does that work?
Well, I don't particularly know. Let me try to break some of it. First, it's like you got to find the cracks within the cracks within the cracks. But I tell some of my friends that are younger comics, like, let's say over here you have an idea. Okay, this is an idea, and then over here you have a joke that's finished, a joke that works, a joke that when you go on stage, 99% of the time they're going to laugh at it. Okay, there's some sort of process between that occurs between this and this. Okay, and honestly, I don't know what it is. There's a million different ways to take it. There's a million different exercises to do. But what I can tell you is if you do it frequently enough, you get better at it. That's the only thing I can say is if you just keep doing it, keep saying, I have this, I'm going to make it funny. A lot of times you won't, that's why I say, I'll still do some exercises of like, I'm going to write jokes about the news. I'm never going to use those in my act. They're going to be dead in 2 weeks, but you got to keep practicing, you got to keep trying. And it's not where like, it's in some ways it's worse than wrestling, because with wrestling, it's like, okay, you show a kid, a penetration step. After a few months, he's going to probably get fairly good at it. You know what it reminds me of the most of is running the pipe in wrestling. That technique, I don't know exactly. I had a ton of clinicians show it to me. I had a ton of coaches showed it to me, and I just didn't get it. And then somewhere along the way, I think it was, probably Wes Roper and Chris Whalen up at Mizzou like had a couple of tricks, but it was at some point, I think it was right around sophomore year, I just popped this guy and I was like, oh my God, I just ran the pot. Like it worked. I just did it, you just got to keep hacking away at it and come at it from different angles. So yeah, and then it's, the funniest stuff is within the cracks of the cracks of the cracks. I heard, John Smith's low single leg, which I unfortunately was on the other end of with Pat Smith in college. But I've heard there's just like, there's minute details that he doesn't necessarily tell everybody, as to like, where are you putting your pinky, or how, you're shifting your arm or your hand 1 degree instead of, 6 degrees or something like that. So it's within the cracks of the cracks of the cracks. The difference between, something that's funny and not funny sometimes is very, very small details.
Is there an environment for you where that kind of, right, like I'm going to get into those details. Is there an environment that you create for that? Or can you just kind of make that happen now? I mean, you've been in the business a long time.
What do you mean environment? Like physical environment or
like physical or even emotional? Like kind of like I need to be in this kind of headspace, or I've got my music on. Like, do you have any kind of?
No, I mean, I try to more often than not. Hopefully, after this is done, I'll do it. Get a cup of tea, which my comedian friend Mark Gross calls hot lady water. I don't drink coffee, but I get my tea. Right now I'm quarantining, so I'm not. Usually I'll go to a coffee shop, get my tea, sit down, and do a couple exercises. And the one that I always try to do is take a pen and a notebook. Has to be pen, has to be a notebook. It's not computer. And write cursive for at least 3 pages, just stream of consciousness. Just what is, what happened, what am I feeling? What happened yesterday? What happened today? What happened 10 years ago? Who did I meet? How did I feel? Any of that stuff. And if you get on a tangent, let the tangent happen. Don't necessarily try to be funny. If something occurs to you within that process that's, semi-interesting, write it up top in the margin, and maybe you go back and grab that. If you sit down and say what's funny, it's impossible. There's nothing. It's like there's nothing is funny. So I start with what is interesting, or what happened that doesn't normally happen. What interrupted. You think of your day. What interrupted the continuum of the day? Like what stood out? And a lot of times you can turn interesting or odd into funny. And again, it's like you put it into that process of like, let's just start with this thing, and then let's put it through the meat grinder and see if we can get to something over here. And, that can take, I don't know, sometimes you get it in 30 seconds. And sometimes it's honestly 10 years. Like it can be a little bit frustrating, but again, try to have small amounts of joy within the process. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not the most spiritual person, but I do believe sort of like if you do that in the morning or you do that on a regular basis, your mind sort of opens up to stuff that's out there. So all comedians have this thing where it's like you just are getting out of the shower or you're in the middle of a conversation. It just hits you and you're like, oh, that's a bit, like that's a joke. And I think I got it. And you're like, it almost seems like cheating, it's like, well, I didn't do any work for that. In my mind, if you do the work in the beginning of the day, or you do that on a regular basis, more of those moments will occur.
You meditate?
I have tried. I started messing around with it during the pandemic, and it's on and off. And I probably need to get back on it. I'm not sure. I think there's some benefit to it. So yeah, but it's yeah, I don't. I mean, I think the journaling process is somewhat meditative.
Sure.
But I do think I probably get something from meditation. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounds like so many of the things that you talk about, there's the long term, but you also have to be in the moment, right? You
Yeah.
have to be present. And it's so much of that's meditation and mindfulness and awareness, and you can call it what you want, but and to write stuff down, I mean, yeah, come on, that's getting it from the inside out, right?
Yeah, I think so. And your brain plays a lot of tricks on you, and I don't live in the moment enough. And I wish I would have known about some of this stuff, in when I was wrestling. Because there was a lot of times where I just wasn't in the moment, even in a match. I can remember thinking, like, oh, I'm out here, I'm doing this thing. Like, I know this guy might beat me, and it's like, nah, just react, just go. In the moments when I did, I think I was a lot better than I was, and when I wasn't.
Greg, how hard are you on yourself in regards to your own performances? Has that been a challenge for you in any way or do you put, I just, to me, that would be really difficult. Like you mentioned a couple of your earlier shows that you didn't feel like were up to speed, and
yeah, they were. Yeah, up to speed is a really, really generous term for some of those early shows. Hag, they were god awful. Yeah. I think early on, I was extremely hard on myself with failure. I would carry it around for weeks. It just like was a part of you. You just had this horrible show, and I almost felt like, I almost had to confess it to people when I met them, or they could see it within me. And, I still will have a bad show every now and then, not that often, especially if it's in the right setting, but every now and then it'll be a show that didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Wrestling people have tricked me into doing like, I mean, I love doing shows for wrestlers, but sometimes there's been a couple of places where it's like, guys, I don't think that's going to be really good, man. There's going to be a bunch of wrestlers talking to each other in the back. It's not really great. And come on, man, it'll be great. People love you and they want to see you. And, I'll get there and it just goes awful. And I'm just furious. The difference is like my recovery time is really good. Usually next morning I'm done with it. I don't really carry it around hardly at all anymore. There's a couple of television performances that I wasn't happy with, and it got to me a little bit. It really made me angry, but and I carried it around a lot longer than I should have. But yeah, I think I think with wrestling, I was used to winning most of the time. I mean, I certainly didn't win all the time in college, but I did pretty well. And you sort of, you tend to polarize the experience, where it's like, was that a win or was that a loss? Well, maybe it was a little bit of both, but as a wrestler, you're like, I either won or I lost. That's it, and if it's a loss, I should mourn the loss and beat myself up over the loss. But, I do think there's something about, there's some failures in comedy, and they're painful and they're public. And I think I certainly experienced some of that in wrestling, and you just sort of feel like, okay, at some point let's just go back to work, get lost in the work a little bit, get lost in the process.
I love what you just said, is that those losses are painful and they're public. And certainly, that represents our sport, in wrestling, is like things that we do are very public, and that we're, a wrestler is out there by himself.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, you've got no one to blame but yourself, I guess. But
did that help you early on, since wrestling's such a one-on-one sport?
Yeah, I think it did help. I think, it's been so long ago, but I in some ways I think it did. Just because you just realize, I mean, I had some friends that, that they had no athletic experience, and they're great comedians, and some are really funny, but some of them, like, I don't think they really believed in the relationship between, work and results. I think there's, I'm a funny guy. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to do what I do. And, sometimes it's going to go well and sometimes it's not. And sometimes some of those guys do well. Some of them are just very, very talented, and sometimes they're so out of their head that it benefits them. But for me, I was like, okay, I know this thing, and I didn't learn it really probably until early high school, because I was, my dad was a coach. I was won almost all the time in Little League. I'd lost every now and then, but I figured, well, that's just losing. I just didn't do well on the match. I didn't really understand. And then you sort of come up against your own limitations, and at some point, and I think these kids are doing it much earlier now, but I didn't really start seeing, get beat on a regular basis until high school. And I was like, oh, I have to figure something out, or I'm just gonna probably win some and lose some for the rest of my career. And I think, with comedy, as soon as I started, quote unquote losing, I was like, I got to go figure some things out. And I listen to a lot of, wrestling podcasts, and, watch a lot of wrestling, and I'm still a huge fan. And, there's some coaches like yourselves that it's really interesting. I listen to Ben talk a lot about, how he coaches. Sometimes there's like complex situations in wrestling where it's just like, this isn't working. And I think in the past, I just avoided it. We're like, well, that's just too complex. I'm not going to be able to solve that. Let's just go on to another technique that's more executable and simpler. And I think I've had maybe the tendency to do some of that in comedy, where it's like, well, that's just this problem that I'm encountering with this joke. It's too complex. It's going to take forever to get to the bottom of why this isn't working, or, helping them see what I see in my head, or even discovering what I'm actually trying to see in my head. So I'll avoid it. And I've been trying lately to lean into those a little bit more, because some of the stuff I've heard Ben say,
You're
Ben
okay going into that uncomfortable place.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm okay, but I realized that I need to do more of that.
There's value in the journey, whether it's fun going in or not. Right?
And it's not a, I don't think it's like a cowardice or good person, bad person. It's just, there's so many choices in wrestling, right? There's so many things you can work on. Sometimes it just makes sense to be like, well, no, let's work on the thing that I can execute quickly, and that I can learn quickly and be competent at quickly. Why would I want to do that thing? There's when I got all these other things. There's some argument that says you shouldn't, especially for a middle school coach or something. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to have my kid work on this technique that's, incredibly complex, when I could, have him work on an inside cradle, and, and he can pin most of his guys. So not to say that there's probably Ben has a million complexities probably to an inside cradle that I don't even understand, but so I think that's the same with comedy. Is that, like, I literally, and that's you can get paralyzed because there's no rules in what I'm doing. I can write about anything I want. I can talk about anything I want. So it's like, well, and then sometimes it's like, I can talk about anything I want, and now I'm talking about nothing because there's too many choices. So you tend to go with, well, this is a thing. I got to get something with some traction. I got to find some traction here. And the stuff where you're not getting traction, you're like, well, that just, I don't want to mess with that. I'm getting nothing. I'm putting in these hours and nothing is coming of it. You probably need to go deeper into it.
Greg, is there anything in that same train of thought? Is there anything in your mind that is just simply too sensitive that you just kind of refuse to go down that lane? Or
for me personally, I don't. But that's a choice. And it's not. I've put some borders up on my comedy, which some were, well, I don't talk about politics at all. And I like a lot of political comedians. I think a lot of them are brave, but the environment today, I've sort of, the country is so polarized where probably a lot of the people that paid money to come see me don't agree with any of my politics. And if I start talking about it, they're going to feel the need to get up and walk out. Or to, it reminds me of when I was in sales, and when I was in Houston, I listened to sports station all the time. I love sports radio. So I was listening to sports radio, and the guy little by little started injecting his politics into sports radio. And I'm like, I didn't come here for this. Like, this is not what I came for. I don't want to listen to any of it now. I'm done with you. And so I don't do that.
Who'd you vote for? No, I'm just
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Probably not who most wrestlers voted for. Yeah. And some of it is, I go back and forth. You'll notice I'm a little conflicted about everything, but it's like, some of me is like, well, you're a coward for not talking about it. And there's some things. And then part of me is like, well, no, this country's so polarized. Maybe this is one of the few places where we can all sort of enjoy ourselves and, not have to hate each other because of what we think about some issues,
I love that, Greg. I think,
yeah.
I think it's brave to stay in that lane almost, because everybody wants you or expects you to jump on what the obvious is. And you've chosen to sort of, what I've listened to, steer away from going down those paths that are the most obvious. And like you said, you talk about things that are most relevant to you and your life and your experience.
Important topics like peanut butter.
Yeah, peanut butter. Jif. Not Skippy.
Yeah.
And Jif.
Skippy, Ag, I hope you don't eat it, man.
I don't eat it.
I didn't think you did. Yeah, I can,
I'm one of those 5% that you mentioned that eat the organic peanut butter that you have to spend time stirring.
You stir it. You have to stir. You have to stir the product. You have to stir. Hey, why don't you guys just hand me a bag of peanuts and a hammer? I'll just smash them up myself. I'm supposed to help you make the peanut butter? Come on. Yeah. No,
it's no win, man. It's no win.
Also, my comedy's, it's clean. And that is, a lot of people will be like, well, that makes it better. It's not. There's guys that are filthy that are hilarious. And I used to be more profane when I did comedy. I was never filthy, but I was certainly profane for a better part of my early career. And little by little, I started getting a little bit more cleaner, mostly because I wanted to do stuff on TV. I like the idea of doing, and radio. I've done a lot of stuff on radio over the years, and I wanted to be able to do that. And you have to write clean for certain TV stations or certain networks. And then over time, this is, I don't know, man, this is probably about 6-7 years ago, maybe a little longer. I get played a lot on Sirius radio, on satellite radio, Sirius XM. They probably play like 5 or 6 tracks of mine a day. And it's great, man. A lot of people know who you are. It's somewhat lucrative. It's a really, really cool thing. And that's been going on for years. And the guy that is in charge of comedy at Sirius is a guy I've known for a long time. He actually used to be with Comedy Central Records, and he put out my first album, and he's a really good guy, and I trust him. And at one point he was like, hey man, you're almost clean. Like, he's like, you're just about 5% shy of being, totally clean. Because you need to just go that extra 5%. It's silly. If you get to that point, we're going to be able to play your stuff a lot more on certain channels. You're going to be able, there's a lot of other things that are open up to you. So it wasn't like a moral choice. It was more of a, just a practical business choice. And I was like, he said, hey, if you can get me a clean album, I have this thing that I want to do with it, and you'll be happy. And I was like, okay, let me do that. Let me just do that first project. And I did it, and it was great. It was a sort of a turning point in my career. And then, I've been that way ever since. Now, if you go to a show in a comedy club, especially a late show Friday, you'll hear a few words here and there. I'd rather not, and I would like to get to the point where I don't ever say it. But yeah, I'll slip up a little bit sometimes. But the stuff that I put out is clean, and most, 99% of my material that you'll hear on stage is clean. So that's, those are some parameters that I've put up.
Was that the same in your wrestling rooms growing up and in college? Like, was it a pretty clean environment? I know some rooms,
no.
you do a bomb and it's 50 push-ups. Okay, gotcha.
No, gotcha. There's I mean, it's certainly there's a lot of profanity involved on my end and on the coach's end, and I did a little bit of coaching. There's there's stuff that I did in college and I did as a young adult that I'm ashamed of. But yeah, that's another thing about comedy is I don't necessarily think, and some people will tell you every private detail about their lives, and it's very funny. And there's certain stuff that I don't put out there. And again, I wrestle with that. I'm like, well, you're a coward, and then I'm like, well, no, I just don't know if that's necessarily what my brand has become. So maybe at some point I will share more of it, but no, the wrestling rooms were they were not clean by any stretch. Yeah. I mean, when I was in high school, there wasn't much of that going on with my dad as a coach, but
Greg, you mentioned,
how was that? Go ahead. How's that having dad as a coach growing up? We've got a lot of listeners who are,
we do.
Dads, and they're trying to figure out and negotiate that coaching world with their kids. And should I wear a hat that says coach and a hat that says dad when I'm on a different role? Like,
yeah, he was my high school coach. So it was, it was very rewarding. We have a bond that's pretty cool. My dad and I go to, we went to the Big 8 tournament or the Big 12 tournament this year. We're going to go to the NCAA tournament. Been to a lot of NCAA tournaments together. There's a bond that we have that I think is very, very unique. And we shared some stuff that, most people don't get to share. There were some difficulties, it's just, there were probably some stuff that both of us would have done differently, I know my dad has said that he would, but I think in any parenting, I'm not a parent, but in any parenting, there's probably a lot of decisions that you look back on and be like, I probably would handle that a little bit differently,
Well, you mentioned in one of your acts, Greg, that he still is evaluating your tapes and your videos from back.
Yeah, that happened for a long time, and that, again, that's a really, the bit goes, he still watches tapes of me wrestling, in high school, and I'm 53, what were you doing in this match? I don't know, Dad. I haven't wrestled. I quit wrestling 28 years ago. You quit wrestling in the middle of this match. That's when you quit wrestling, so that's the bit. And that's a lesson in comedy. So the wording, probably he didn't say that exactly, but he has that attitude. But I do remember going like, there's only a few matches that he used to put on. One was, when I got All-American my senior year, and that match he likes to watch. And it was a pretty good match. But another one is like, I tied this guy in high school as a junior, and it wasn't a good match. I basically, that guy wound up being a state champ too. He went down in weight class, or he was a senior, my senior year. Yeah. The only match I didn't win, I tied the guy who wound up going down and winning the state championship at a lower weight. But that guy, the match I got out ahead and gassed, just completely ran out of gas. And and I'll go home and, he's like several times I went home and he'd have it on and want to watch it. I'm like, why do we want to watch this? Like, do you know how many matches I won? Like I won a lot in high school. Why do you have to watch this? You learn more from the losses. I mean, Pringles salesman. What am I going to learn from?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Greg, quick question.
Yeah.
Do you share material? Do you have other guys that you visit with that you collaborate on with material or bounce things off of? How does that work in the comedy world?
It's there's certainly nothing structured, but yeah, you find, for me personally, I've found 2 or 3 people that I trust on a regular basis. Like I have a friend, Mark Gross, who's one of my best friends. He's a writer. He was a comedian, and he got into sort of being a television writer. So he's written a lot of CBS shows over the years, and he's a guy that I'll probably call today. I mean, I probably call him 3 or 4 times a week and be like, "Hey, man, what do you think of this?" And he'll do the same with me. Like when he is like writing a script, he'll send. I've seen every script that he's written. For every show that he's pitched. Those guys, for every show that makes it, there's like hundreds that they of pilots that they write and pitch, and I've seen all of them. I try to give him input here and there. And then there's a guy, Brendan Ayer, who's a comic friend of mine, guy that used to open for me. Now he's too good to be opening for anybody. And, I call him probably 3 or 4 times a week and be like, hey, what do you got? Here's what I got. What do you think? And, and there's a few other people, that I can do that with. Sometimes there's a couple guys in St. Louis that I'll get together with at a coffee shop and do it. But, I've learned, don't do it with too many people, because it's, you can, my brother's like one of the funniest guys I know. And I remember early in my career, I'd be like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And he'd be like, yeah. Like, yeah. Like, and you lose confidence in this thing that could be a great idea, because, you need to really, it needs to be somebody that you really, really is listening and really, really is interested, and also somebody that, that's funny, and somebody that where you're kind of going back and forth, and really wants to help you and has the time to help you, which most people don't. Most people have lives and jobs and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's like probably 2 friends on a regular basis, and then maybe a handful of other ones. We'll do it a few times a year, something like that. I mean, it is a thing. Sometimes it's easier to help somebody than help yourself, like with comedy, because you're not emotionally attached to it. So it's like, I can be walking through a room at the open mic night, which I still, there's an open mic night in St. Louis on Tuesday nights that if I'm in town, I'll usually go to. And it's somewhat of a social thing too. All the comics are around, and I'm the old guy there now, but I can be walking through the room and be like, just like literally walk through for 10 seconds, be like, I know how to fix that joke. Like, that word needs to get out, that word needs to be there, and you're not making this clear enough. And then you listen to your own stuff, and you're thinking about, wow, my voice sounds horrible, and I'm not. What am I stuttering? I sound like an idiot, and why have I not? Like, you're too much in your head, so you don't always hear it with yourself. I've gotten to the point now where I can do it with myself a lot too. I listened to a lot of my shows. So that's a big part of writing for me, is just listen to a show from last week or a couple weeks ago, and just sort of let it sink in. But yeah, sometimes it's easier for another person to unlock something.
How influential was Columbia's J School to what you're doing now?
I don't know. I mean, I think everything in your life has some influence. Certainly with J School, I think it was an introduction to communicating in a clear and concise manner, which is a lot of what stand-up comedy is. So, I think that's a big part of it. And I do remember, like, one of the first times I was in front of people was I had to give like a presentation. I was in the advertising track for journalism school, and I had to give I had to develop some TV campaign, and mine was about Jell-O, and I got up in front of people and presented my campaign, and I thought I'm going to try to make them laugh, and I did, and then the professor laughed. This guy Henry Hager was my favorite professor in college, and so that I definitely that was an influence, and just this sort of overriding thing of I don't know if some people are like, well, college, what do you actually use from it? Well, you do have to spend 4 years pursuing one thing. You have to get this degree, and you have to, so that, that's helpful.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Great. Well, this is my last question.
I got all day. Whatever you guys want.
No, you don't. You got some jokes to write, but here's
yeah. I'm trying to put that off.
What's the one thing that you haven't done yet in your career that you would like to be able to do, or something that you have done and you want to do it again?
Man, that's a great question, Hag. Always want more, and I'm getting to an age where I don't know if I've done a lot of stuff. I don't know if show business is completely in love with me at my age, or but what I would really, really like to do is have more people see this hour than saw the last one, and I think that's what I want to keep doing. I would like to keep creating material on a regular basis and put it out. And I think the hour for me is the best form, because a lot of people hear it on Sirius Radio. It's great because it can always go there. The last one we put out first on Amazon, and we got a lot of really good feedback on that. And then we moved it over to YouTube. And it got some good feedback there, but I think mostly I would just like a lot of people to be able to watch this next hour and enjoy it. So I feel like there's a sort of I've gotten a lot of people to people know who I am to some degree, but I haven't quite hit that point where it's like, I think if you get to a certain amount of people, then it really starts to spread. You always want more, but I just need to sort of focus on, let's try to make it the best hour that I can do. And I've got 4 months to really work on that, put the finishing touches on it. And I'm partnered up with some people that I think will be able to hopefully take it to the next level. So.
Is that the project, Greg? Sorry, I said last question, but is that the project that you referenced that you're also working on? Is that an extended version, or what is? Can you give us some insight on what the big project is?
It's just an hour of material. It's just a stand-up special.
Gotcha.
It's just my next hour of material, and we'll shoot it. We're shooting it in Lexington, Kentucky on October 1st, and it'll probably be released a couple months after that, maybe a few months. I don't know. It takes a while to edit stuff like that and get it right. And I don't know where it'll be released. I know eventually it'll go to Sirius Radio. I'm not sure video wise. These days, a lot of comics, some of my favorite comics are just taking it right to YouTube, and just, going around some of the networks and stuff like that. And just like, and they're getting millions and millions of views. And I had a special on this thing called Dry Bar, I don't know, 6-8 years ago, and that those have millions of views. So maybe that's the best place to go is somewhere on YouTube. So I'm not sure. And like I said, I partnered up with a couple of people that I think are going to help take it to the next level. So yeah, I'm excited about it. We'll see. It's the nice thing is with comedy, night in, night out, I'll get plenty of feedback on whether it's funny or not.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have a lot of fans like we said, in the wrestling community. Everybody knows Greg Warren. Some of the takes that we've seen on Flow and other outlets.
Oh yeah, those
wrestling.
Those have been really fun, man. Those have been great, man. I had a lot of fun trying to find what's funny about wrestling and having wrestlers watch it. I've had a ball with that, man. I haven't done anything with it in a while. I should probably get back to doing something, but yeah, a couple of the projects we did, it was making that stall camp film was maybe one of the funnest things I've ever done in my life, man. Just really enjoyed it.
You know, it seems like every time you come into the Kansas City area, I'm gone. And I've missed, I don't know how, it's like I'm traveling for something with wrestling, but
yeah, you're out there a lot, man.
I'm out there a little bit too much. And hopefully next time you're in the Kansas City area, I get a chance to.
And now Keenan's coaching in college, right?
Yeah, he's actually it has been made official, I guess, so I can share the information. But he's actually moving down to your alma mater. He's going to be helping as a operations director at Mizzou.
Is that right, man?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
good for him.
He's going in a whole nother place.
Oh man, he'll do a great job, man.
He's
fantastic.
Really excited. He knows, having a mentor working with
Brian
Smith.
and
Brian
the whole staff there, I think, is
Kendrick and Tyrell and Dom and just some great people down there. So he's really fired up about that.
Man, that's pretty cool. That's awesome. Well, good.
Yeah,
for
I know he's certainly one of your biggest fans, and he'll be excited to know that we.
He was, man. I remember watching him in high school. Like, he was so good, man. That's back when I was doing a little coaching with my dad. He was really, really good, man.
Yeah. Well, anything else from Mike? What else is going on? If we don't have anything else for Greg, what can we share about the world of coaches education?
We've got Kids Farmington. Kids Nationals are going to be in Farmington, Utah, June 26th through the 28th. So end of the month, that's coming up. And of course, Fargo, our big junior nationals, has happened in the middle of July. So we're going to do a coach's well-being station in Fargo. So you can come up and grab a granola bar and a bottle of water. And in case you didn't get a lot of sleep the night before, or maybe you're a little dehydrated, then maybe you go into the gym a little bit better prepared. So maybe we'll force a little coach education information down there.
You got it. Maybe we could find some Jif peanut butter to put on those.
There we go.
Yeah. Don't let Hag try to force some of that organic garbage down your throat, man.
If we only had a connection in the Jif world. And I have to say, Greg, so and my wife knows a lot of the folks that we've had the opportunity to interview during our podcast for this Heads Up podcast. But she really doesn't listen. She likes the true crime stuff, and that's kind of what she spends her time listening to.
Yeah.
But we were just coming back from wrestling camp in my hometown in Iowa, and both of the Nate Bargatze specials that you're on. She's the podcast. Yeah. The podcast for Nate Land. Yeah. And so we listened to all of those on the way back from Iowa, and she was just like, she goes, "This is a podcast I'm listening to," and I'm sitting there going like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the wrestling guy." And Bruce Baumgartner and Steve Frazier and Clarissa Chen. She's like, I don't really need to listen to them, but I'm really excited to listen to
Nate's podcast is pretty awesome, man. He's Nate's one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet, and the other guys in there are really, really, really good. And I'm gonna hopefully do some stuff with Nate in the future. So his career is taking off, man. He's getting big, but those guys are real funny in there. And they just added Dusty Slay in as a regular cast member, who's one of the better comics I've ever seen. So yeah, it's
great.
Good.
What would be the best way for people that maybe the one or two people that are listening to the podcast that don't know how to connect with you? What are some of the best ways to find some of your stuff?
You could just Google Greg Warren or go to YouTube and search Greg Warren. There's two specials up there. I think the dry bar one, and then I did one about farming called Where the Field Corn Grows, and that's pretty proud of that. And if you go to my website, which is Greg Warren Comedy, there's a place to sign up on the mailing list, so I can tell you when I'm coming to your town. But man, if you Google me, usually something will come up.
The wrestling stuff's going to hit really well, I would think, in Tulsa. That's got to be a pretty. That's It's
Tulsa. My buddy Brett Gray I think he's got some kind of wrestling camp that he's doing down there during the day. I may try to head over and
that's awesome.
And go see what they're doing. Yeah,
good wrestling people in Tulsa area.
Oh yeah, man.
Well, Greg, I can't, again, thank you enough for jumping on and spending a little better than an hour with us, and just
anytime, guys. Yeah, really enjoyed talking with you, man. Thanks for everything that you guys do for wrestling, man. It's great.
We appreciate it.
I think the coaching these days is it's amazing. Some of the coaching that some of these kids are getting at even a really, really young age.
It's pretty amazing what we're seeing in today's world with some of these youth club kids. Pretty.
Yeah. I mean, I'm away from it, but every now and then I'll watch a high school match and I'll be like, this kid, his fundamentals are like he's a D1 wrestler right now.
I got to drill with Joey McKenna when he was like in 6th grade. And I was like, man, there's something about this young man.
Yeah.
He was drilling better than I think any of my college teammates drilled.
Oh yeah, man.
This kid's good.
Yeah, it's so clean, some of the technique. It's unbelievable. I mean, and they're figuring out stuff that, they know how to cut leg attacks off when they're in the 3rd grade. I didn't really.
Well, Greg, maybe sometime after the show is released in October, we can get you back on and talk.
Would love to, man. Yeah, I'd love to be part of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been Mike Clayton, Mike Haggerty, and Greg Warren on Heads Up Podcast. Goodbye.
Hey, thanks, guys.